Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why Plarium Why. Of course, we're doing another Raid Shadow Legends video, but we have today a new Heroes Path. We have the Equinox Path, which is obviously comes to the end of the autumn, cool, whatever. We've got a path here, and it is probably the first place that I remember that you can actually earn one of these mythical tomes, I guess. I think maybe there was the champion chase as well, but you can earn mythical tomes on this path. Now, it's a bit of a weird path here. It's like kind of like sort of two triangles. So in this video, we're going to have a look at the rewards. We're going to have a look at the break points in terms of like how many points you need, different paths you can get to it, and we're going to have a look to see if any of this is worth it. So they always do like this little news thing now, and I do want to just call out something on here which someone in Discord actually pointed out, which is very hilarious, I have to say. So from the 22nd to the 26th, you've got like 3 days. It's probably going to end just as CVC starts. CVC is next week. We'll be running this path. You'll get 3 ways to earn points: getting artifacts or dungeon divers, summoning souls from soul stones, and then summoning champions from shards. So they've essentially replaced like a summon rush or a champion chase with this path event, which instead of what we'd normally have on this weekend. What I will say is, as usual, the souls are not good enough because they're having to put 3 paths in here, 3 ways to earn rewards. If the souls was good enough on their own, we wouldn't have 3. And I mentioned this in the last time they did like a soul type video, and I'm just repeating it again. The soul drop rates in terms of the amount of points you get, it's not good enough. It's too low. But this is the sentence I kind of want to call out. Each path contains different rewards. You can choose which reward path you want to explore. All 6 reward paths will be open to you from the start, meaning you won't have to collect any keys during this event. Now, what I will say is there isn't 6 paths. There's technically only 1 path, really, if we think about it. It just depends whether you want to go down the right-hand side or the left-hand side, because essentially it's really just the same stuff. And what I like normally about Hero Path events is there's always something for someone. You can choose whether you want the book, whether you want the soul that they might put in it. Sometimes they put a champion soul, whether you want stuff like the feast, or whether you want the oils, or whether you want something else, right? You normally can choose what reward you want and spend your points to get what you want at the current progression of your account. Where this one, you can't really, because essentially the left-hand path is the same as the right-hand path. All of the rewards are exactly the same amount of points. You're basically just deciding, do you want oil instead of essence, or do you want the barrel instead of the chicken? What's the point of that? This isn't really a path. It's just basically a summon rush where instead of you getting the same rewards linearly, you just get to pick the rewards linearly, because you don't actually get more choice. The only choices you get are these things that you don't need to progress down a path, right? You don't need to pick these brews up. You don't need the oil. You only have to go down one side. You don't have to go down both. You can choose here. The only 2 choices you have is, do I go essence, or do I go oil, or do I go barrel, or do I go chicken, or the feast if you wanted to, I guess. But I mean, who's going to spend 30k for a feast? I wouldn't. So, because once you unlock one of these, you can unlock all the bottom row. Once you get to one of these rewards, all the bottom row is unlocked. So you can get 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. You can get all the books just on one path. So I don't really understand the point of this Heroes Path. You kind of destroyed the concept of the Heroes Path because you haven't made it dynamic. You haven't made it flexible. There's no options here. It's basically the same thing. Let's have a look at the quality of the rewards. These top rewards are basically, for the majority of players, ignorable. 5 brews is not really going to cut it. We just had a Dungeon Divers where we had 50 brews as one reward, for example. So 5 brews is not really going to cut it. If you need rare books, great. Rare books are quite hard to get hold of these days, especially as you tend to progress through the clan boss very quickly. Beyond where you get rare books, you get to Nightmare and you stop getting rare books at that point. Core Hammers, I feel has lost a lot of value now that Stone Skin Protection and all the other sets, which are a little bit more higher priority, is kind of made Swift Parry less of a priority, which as a result devalues these Core Hammers. So Core Hammers not so great. The Greater Oil is, we will be doing a bit of a math experiment in terms of, how much energy does this 60 oil translate into if we were to run the highest stage of Sand Devil. We've got some 4-star chickens. We've got 100 gems, an epic book. It starts getting more interesting now. 6-star speed glyphs, I'll take those. Then we get 100 tier 3, so sort of superior oil, pretty good. 5 essence, pretty good as well. And then we get to, basically the Kraken tier of stuff. The barrels, as I always tell people, some people say barrels are quite good. I actually just think barrels are just wasted for the majority of people, because you're going to make your champion rank 6, then level them up in Minotaur. So you're really just not saving anything. The feast is much more valuable. The feast is pretty valuable. The barrel is not so much. And we got a 5-star chicken, and then we get these books. Now, there's no point really getting mythical tomes because it's very hard to get a mythical champion, and I actually think there will be better ways to get mythical tomes in the future. But if you've picked up a mythical champion, then this is probably the only way you're going to get mythical tomes, so it kind of adds a different sort of calculation to it. So let's take a look at the numbers. Let's have a look at how this looks in terms of, like, you know, how many points, how much energy, how many shards, what is it going to cost you if you want to do this godforsaken awful event. So if you've not seen any of my hero path breakdowns before, you probably haven't seen this spreadsheet before. I've upgraded a little bit for this hero's path, but essentially what I do is I pull out all of the rewards into a simple Excel spreadsheet, so we can work out exactly how many points we're going to need. If you want to complete this entire path, you need 210,000 points. And you can see all the rewards along here. So what I then tend to do is basically calculate what I think are desirable paths for people to sort of pick, depending on what you want in your game progression, whether you want the book, whether you want the oil, whether you want something else. Now, this path is a little bit more complicated because essentially there aren't really paths in a traditional sense. There's basically one route to whatever reward you want. So all we're doing is we're kind of like restructuring the selection points at the bottom and those oil points. So you can see I have kind of said path 1 and path 2, but essentially that is basically the left hand side and the right hand side. They're identical points. We just put them in here so that we can get a total point count. Everything that I'm calling bonus is not essential for you to be able to get to the bottom. They're in addition to the standard path. You can see legendary book here is on path 1. Eternal Soul Essence is on path 1, but the other Eternal Soul Essence is on path 2. And then you can see things like the Superior Oil is considered bonus. So that's what I'm doing. And then obviously the capstone is the bottom row. So there's the points there. I've actually structured this as sort of like 5 paths. I've kind of considered how much it costs you to get 1 legendary book, how much it costs you to get 1 mythical book, how much it's going to cost you to get the feast path, how much it's going to cost you just to get artifact ascension oil in total, all of the oils, and then how much it's going to cost you to get all of the essences. So it's like, do I want the souls? Do I want the oil? Do I want the feast? Do I want the book? That's kind of the paths I'm looking at. Now, obviously, if you want more than 1 book, you could just add 10,000 to this total every single time. Now, as I said before, I wanted to do this time just some sort of enhancements to this path so we can understand sort of what is the equivalent value of something as a reward. This is particularly applicable to the artifact ascension oils. We all know we have to farm Sand Devil to get oil. So if we're going to be given 200 great superior oil and 60 greater oil, how much energy, if we were to farm it in Sand Devil, is that equivalent to? Well, we can use the sort of artifact oil ascension charts that we've got that basically determines, based on the drop rate and the probabilities, how much of a specific oil do we get per energy. So for stage 24, we get 0.055 oil per energy. Now, obviously, you can't get 0.055 oils in one go. You're going to get a batch of like 5 or 6. This is just how we translate it to a oil per energy ratio. So that once I know how much oil per energy I'm getting, I can then divide that with the total number of oil. And then that will tell me a rough estimate of how much energy I would need to consume on that stage to be able to get the same equivalent amount of oils out. So for the 200 superior oil, it's about 3,636 energy on stage 24. Stage 25 is much more efficient for superior oils, so it will cost you 3,030 energy, right? Stage 25 is much better to farm for the superior, and it's probably the best one now for the lesser oil as well, since they've changed the rates. 60 greater oil, however, technically stage 24 is a little bit more efficient. You basically kind of like substitute 1 superior roll for 1 greater roll on stage 24 and 25. That's how they do it. So when you go to 25, you're getting 1 extra roll or 1 extra reward of superior oils. So you get 0.138 greater oil per energy and 0.132, which is about 450 energy pretty much on both. So basically, if you're running stage 25 like I do, I run stage 25 with Ninja, Aneri, and 3 food, I would have to consume around about 3.5k energy, 3,485 to be specific, for this exact same reward. So that's what we've got to keep in mind. When we're looking at this path for artifact oil, it needs to be somewhere in the equivalency of 3,485 energy, or what we would consider an equal sum for that, because that's how much you're essentially spending to get those oils. Now let's have a quick look at the dungeon divers here. As you can see, I've pulled out all of the percentages for getting artifacts on each individual stage. We pull out the actual sort of the points that we get for getting those specific artifacts, sort of the light coins. They're called egg coins here because this is just a spreadsheet that I used for the egg one, was probably the Razzlevarg summoning, but these points are still the same. I should say that they haven't adjusted any of the points for this path. We're getting the same amount of summoning, we're getting the same amount of souls, we're getting the same amount of dungeon divers. We can then take those points, divide it with the percentages here, and that will then give us an average light coin per run. But more importantly, how many light coins do we get per energy for each stage? And what it always ends up, as we know with most dungeon diver events, stage 20 is the most efficient one by quite a margin. Stage 16 is technically more efficient in terms of energy, but not time, because essentially you'll get 4-star gear, and also you'll have to run twice as like a very significant large amount more runs. It's like quite a significant chunk you'll see when we look at it. But so basically means that stage 20 is normally the way you want to run it if you want to do it just with dungeon divers. But pretty much with heroes paths, there's always one dominant, or in this case, 2 dominant paths and 1 weak path. And the weak path normally is like dungeon divers. It's normally not the way to do it. You're normally supplementing your coins with dungeon divers, not doing dungeons to get coins. Now, in terms of the summons math over here, we got the points at the top here. You can see we get 4,500 sacreds. Now, this is the first summoning heroes path with primal shards. So that is at 1,800. That's how much they've given you in terms of points for primal. So again, they're putting it at essentially 10 times the value of an ancient shard. Is a bit better than a void shard, and then not as good as a sacred shard. Now, what I've done in this particular video is I've applied what I would consider either the go-in rate or what they're selling it for. Now, this isn't what I would suggest are good prices for these shards. That's my own personal opinion, but what they would normally charge you. Sacreds might be a little bit undervalued for what they would normally charge you, but basically a rough kind of how much, would it cost to get one of these shards from a pack. So you can see primals are currently priced them around about $8.33. Sacreds are generally $20 to $25. Voids tend to be around about $2.5, and ancients tend to be about $1.5. So we can take these numbers and then almost work out the cost value of this hero's path. And that's kind of what I've done this video to upgrade it a little bit so we can put a bit of reality to this path. So we can see I've put my paths here, what I wanted, artifact oil essences, and then we can work out how many shards we need. So if you want a legendary book, it's going to cost you 10 sacred shards. Now, if we think about how a normal summon rush would be, normal summon rush, you start getting a sacred shard around about 3,500 to 4,000 points. You get 500. So that's basically about 2, maybe 1 more sacred shard than normal from a summon rush. So you could go into this going, well, I basically get all those extra rewards and I get a legendary book for basically the same thing as a summon rush. That's up to you. You need 24 primals for the legendary book, 39 voids, and 240 ancients. Now, what I always tend to say with hero path summoning is the void shards always end up being the better shard here. Sacred shards for summon rush are good. Ancient shards for champion chase are good. For hero's path, it tends to be voids just because you get a better balance between the amount of points you need and how many you need to consume. Right, 39 voids versus 10 sacreds is a bit more of an equal equation, I would say, but normally voids are a bit better. Now, if we want the mythical book, it's around about 12 sacred shards. There's 30 primal shards, 48 voids. You can see that ancients are always quite expensive to get anything out of these paths. If you want to complete the entire event, we are talking 47 sacreds, 117 primals, 191 voids, or 1,167 ancient shards. So let's apply the real world value to this. If you want that legendary book, you're spending about $98. This is where I'm saying void shards are better for this pack. Now, you can see the clear distinction here in terms of like the real world value. If you were to buy your way through this path, you can see that void shards are way cheaper. They're almost like half the price of any other shard. Primal shards are basically the same price as a sacred shard. It's just so silly the way that they price it. We can tell they're overpriced based on that factor. But if you want to do this, you can see that actually doing it in void shards is going to be cheaper long term because of the real world value translation. It's going to be somewhere between 240 to 138 on all your different paths here. You're going to spend around about 144 to 250 on primals. The sacreds and the primals are pretty close. Your void shards are going to be half the price of that, and then ancient shards are going to be double the price of anything else. It's just crazy how bad ancient shards are for this event. Obviously, we can't buy mysteries, so that's not a problem. So if you wanted to basically buy your way all the way through to the end, you're looking at $477 to $1,750 in terms of spending on packs. Now let's have a look at the souls data. So we've got mortal, immortal, and eternal souls. 7,500, 1,500, and 100. These haven't changed. What I have done here is made a distinction between how it compares to, say, sort of normal shards. I haven't put primal in here, but normally we would kind of consider, well, an eternal shard is similar to an eternal, a sacred. Immortal is considered similar to a void. Mortal is an ancient, kind of a comparison. So we can see that actually we lose a lot more in terms of mortal summoning, but we gain a lot more in terms of eternal and immortal. So what they're basically doing is they're valuing the tier 2 and the tier 3 souls much higher than the tier 1 soul in comparison to normal souls, where they're valuing ancient versus sacred, right? There's a little bit more balance between the two. What they're basically saying here is the tier 2 and tier 3 stones are much more valuable than the lower one compared to shards. We can apply what I would consider the current market rate for these stones. I've had a look back a few different packs. I think the Eternal is a little bit higher. It might even be $25 rather than $20. To be honest, I've seen some packs which are like $29.99. So maybe that is about $25. But typically the Immortals are around about $3.50. The Mortals are $1 and the Eternals are $25. Again, these are not what I would pay. This is what they price it at. This is what Plarium are currently charging these packs at. I would actually consider half the price to be more reasonable. I would never buy Mortal Soulstones unless they're half this value. It's just not worth it. If you want to do the Legendary Book, you need 6 Eternal Soulstones or 433 Mortal Soulstones. It's absolutely bonkers. Nobody is ever going to earn enough of these stones to actually get one Legendary Book with just playing the game. You're going to have to spend, because this is crazy amounts. And we can see the spending here. If you want to do it, the cheapest way is Immortal. And ironically, it's about the same price as Voids. 490 here, and then it's about 477 there if you want to do it, right? So about $100 if you want the Legendary Book. And again, as we can see, Mortal Soulstones are terrible. Just like Ancient Shards, you need the premium items to be able to do these efficiently. Otherwise, you just need such a large amount. You just cannot farm these. So how does this actually come together in sort of an analysis and a comparison? Well, we can do like a very big comparison here. And I always like to compare this against sort of traditional dungeon divers or other things. But let's just look at the most obvious thing here, which is the legendary stuff is all up here. We can see these numbers up here. Let's compare it now to the dungeon divers. So if I want to just do it exclusively from Dungeon Divers, right? This is like all the points is going to come from Dungeon Divers. We're talking the most efficient stage is going to be somewhere between 16,000 and 27,000. If I want a Legendary Book, it's 22,000 energy in dungeons. That's why I say often there are 2 dominant paths or 1 dominant path, and then there's a really bad path. Dungeon Divers is always a really bad path. There's just too much you have to do. Now, you can run some dungeons at the same time as doing the primary, but really they want you pulling souls and shards to get the path done. That's what they want you to do. They don't want you doing divers. Because keep in mind, as I said, we were getting 3,485 energy if we would just farm Sand Devil for the oil. And if we want a similar thing, we'd have to spend 16,000 energy. So you can't really run dungeons. You might just run the Sand Devil. It's more efficient. Compared to a normal Dungeon Divers, I price this at around about 7,500 now. If we can compare kind of like how much energy would we need to run to complete a 7,500 Dungeon Divers, which by the way is 10,000 energy now. It's a lot of energy. The essences is about 62% more energy required. We can look at like Artifact Oil is 93% more. Feast, Legendary Books, and Mythical Books are over 100% more. And if you want to do the entire path, it's 900% more than a Dungeon Divers. Now, obviously, one Dungeon Divers is not going to give you 4 Legendary Books, 2 Mythical Tomes, Essence, Oil, all that kind of stuff. But it's still a significantly more expensive thing to use. So, I don't know, guys. I'm pretty sure this is the worst Heroes Path I've ever seen. It's terrible, right? I mean, you could make a case for, okay, well, what if you did all the way down the left and then you wanted just Legendary Books? So what would be the cost if I got 4 Legendary Books, right? So this would basically be 30,000 more. So this would be 73,000. Or for the price of like 4 Legendary Tomes. So what are we saying here? So for basically 75,000 silver, 5 Rarity Charms, 1 Rare Book, 10 Core Hammers, 1 4-star Chicken, 100 Gems, an Epic Book, 6-star Glyph, either the Oil or the Essence. I would argue the Essence is probably more appropriate because it's hard to acquire. So get the Essence, then the 5-star Chicken, and then 4 Legendary Books. For all of that, how much do we need to consume? Well, it would be 73,250 points, which is the equivalent of 16 Sacred Shards or 67 Voids. Now, keep in mind, we said Voids was the best way to do it. So 67 Voids or 49 Immortal Soulstones or 37,000 energy. Now, you need to make the decision, is that worth it for you? I would say if you are pulling for ×2 voids, then potentially 67 voids, how much is that in Summoner's Rush? It's like 120 times 67. That would complete a normal Summon Rush, which is normally the same amount of books. So it's kind of like the same. I don't know. I can't make it. I think this is just a terrible path, personally. I'm looking at this as a person who probably doesn't have 67 void shards to pull, is thinking there's a fusion around the corner, is thinking, do I want any of this? I even tried to find a positive, like, well, maybe I should just go for the essences or the oil, and it's just too expensive. Like, even the essences, which are rare, right, that you only get those tier 3 essences, you know, the eternal essences, sometimes from Iron Twins and sometimes from like the top of tournaments. It's very rare that you get those tier 3 essences. I got, like, yesterday I got, I think 3, 16,000 energy or 28 void shards. I'd rather just like use my tier 1 stones and sell it for the materials. I don't know. I'm pretty confident in saying this is the worst Hero's Path I've ever seen. I'm pretty confident. I would suggest to most people, don't bother. Basically, just don't bother. We're for sure around the corner from another fusion announcement. We're for sure around the corner for that. Got to be. You can see this, they're doing the one more Fire Knight turn attack. I would imagine we'll get a fusion announcement today, and then that fusion will start on Thursday, which is the day after CVC, and that might be an interesting champion. Now, we are approaching Halloween, so normally Halloween is when we get like this epic into a legendary fusion, right? They do an epic fusion for 1 week because they always want to start the Halloween fusion kind of like a week early. They might do that as well, but yeah, this Hero's Path is awful. It's terrible. So I'm probably going to completely avoid it. I'm 100% not pulling my souls. I've got a lot of them. I can pull 50, 2 and 1, but I feel like it's such a low value. It's just not worth it for me. And I have no void shards, so there's no point me pulling for anything like this. This is kind of nice. She is really good, Xu Zhen. This is really, really good in arena, but the chances of me getting Xu Zhen are so low. Yeah, and I have no voids, and I'm not spending on shards because it's a waste of money, because you just can't get the champions you want. I'll probably walk away with a duplicate void, like another Venus or something that I don't want. So, you know, it is what it is. There you go, guys. That is the Equinox Path fully broken down. We are talking, if you want to do it for a legendary book, somewhere in the region of $400. I hope that kind of like real world money thing was a bit of more of an interesting angle, because it does kind of show you how specific things are much more efficient in terms of costs, like how I've been saying that void shards are actually the better way of doing these summoning paths, because you can spend half the money and get twice as much point, essentially. Let me know if that's really cool. Let me know if you are going for the path. Are you interested in any of these things? I personally, if I'd want that oil, I'm just going to farm it myself. I can do food at the same time. It's more efficient. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.